All right, Pat Brown, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. It's always good to see you. How are things in the great state of Texas this morning?
It's the same way they are in Florida, Jamie. It's hot.
Oh, the humidity festival is in full bloom.
Oh
Let
my
me
God.
tell
Yeah.
you,
Somebody said it's hotter than the hinges on the gates of hell in Houston.
that's not bad at all. Yeah, it's been really intense here. So I either like being in the air conditioned office or at 5,000 feet where it's nice and cool. But
Yeah.
man, at ground level, it's tough. And that kind of brings us to today's topic, Pat. I was thinking about career change in aviation. A lot of people know there's a pilot shortage, there's a mechanic shortage, there's an ATC shortage, and young people are starting to get into aviation, and that's great.
Yeah.
But what if you're 40 or 50? Is it practical to think about I could have a career change from whatever it is I'm doing now and go into aviation? And I started thinking about it. I thought both of us did that.
Yeah.
Now, just a little background. Before you were the king of general aviation and a designated pilot examiner and really the go-to guy for the central United States, I think. What did you used to do for work before this?
I worked for Fender Guitars for a number of years, and then I went to work for a small manufacturer here in Houston that makes drumsticks, mallets, and percussion accessories. And so I was the director of sales and marketing there for 27 years almost, until the company changed hands and the new owners kind of sucked the fun out of it. And it was kind of like, aviation is my other love. Music and aviation were always kind of like this. And I said, so I'm just going to switch over and start doing that for a living. And that was almost 12 years ago now. And I haven't looked back.
And if I'm not mistaken, you started flying when you were a teenager, but it didn't become a career till well later in life.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was 16 years old when I started flying, and I didn't switch over until I was 70 years old. So it was late in life before the actual career change took place. But you had kind of a similar story, I think.
Yeah, I was actually a professional musician. I lived in Greenwich Village section in New York City. I had a band and we were up and coming. And you know how that works. You used to
Oh
be in
yeah,
the music business. You're up and coming until the point where you're not.
until
So
you're not. That's exactly right.
I didn't really start flying till I was doing that. I was in my mid to late 20s when I started flying and frankly, I had no intention of doing this as a job. I just wanted to get out of New York City easier because it's just the bus or the train. New Yorkers tend not to own a car.
Right.
And I thought the airplane would make it easier. And then by the time the reality of my musical career wasn't going to go any farther became clear to me, I started thinking about what could I do, and it's like, well, I like this flying thing, and that's a job. So let's get more serious about it. And like you say, I've never looked back. It's been great. I was 30, 31 when I became a professional pilot, and frankly, I think it was a great career change. I'm really glad I did it.
Yeah, you've only been doing it. So at 31, so you've been doing this for what, 4 or 5 years now.
I'm coming up on my first anniversary. Yeah. But I met a guy. Part of the thing that kicked off this idea is because there are so many openings in aviation, and it can be a very satisfying career. And under certain circumstances, it can be very lucrative. But I was at the airport the other day, just fueling up the airplane, and I'm sitting inside on the couch because it's air conditioned inside
Mhm.
on the couch. And I met a fella there who is he's a chiropractor. He's not retired. He's actively working as a chiropractor, mid 50s, very successful guy. But he was there for his commercial pilot check ride, and his intent is to add on his commercial multi and go to work as a pilot. And I started thinking, you and I get this question all the time from
Yeah.
people saying, am I too old to make that transition? And frankly, no, mid 50s is not too late to make that transition. Depending on what you want to do, maybe even early 60s isn't too late to make that transition if you want to be a CFI or a ferry pilot well, there's just so many options, aren't there?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, when you were talking about the chiropractor friend of yours, I recalled about 6 months ago, I did a commercial check ride for a guy. It was a chiropractor. He's a young guy too, 35, maybe 40. I don't even know. And that's his goal, is at some point in the future to ditch the chiropractic practice and become a professional pilot. I have a really good friend who, and I've known him for years and years and years, owned an Arrow, so lots of retract time, CFI, commercial, and all that stuff. And at age 54, he was a project manager for Shell, and so he traveled all over
I've
the
heard of
country.
them. That's a real company.
It's kind of a big company, yeah. And so at age 54, he just was tired of traveling around to these third world countries doing project engineering for them, and he took a package when it was when it was offered. So he got some money, and he applied to Mesa, and he was accepted at age 54. And a year later, he was in the right seat, and a year after that, he was in the left seat. And he flew with them until he was 64. So this would have been just maybe last year or a year and a half ago, and left Mesa and took a job flying left seat in a Gulfstream. And now he's flying, he's 65 or 66 now, flying all over the world in a Gulfstream in air conditioned comfort at 40,000 feet, and loving every minute of it. So, even at the ripe old age of 54 years old, he was able to very quickly jump into the left seat of an ERJ and parlay that into a real sweet corporate pilot gig. And he can do that for as long as they can insure him.
That was one of the things I wanted to touch on here, because it's relatively common knowledge that at the airline level, if you're an airline transport pilot, you're going to have to retire at 65. That's the current rules. But if you're not flying for a Part 121 carrier, if you're doing charter, or there's actually a Facebook group called Private Jet Pilots. If you're doing something other than the airlines, as long as you can pass the medical and get the insurance, you can keep going, can't you?
Yeah, and you mentioned the current rules. Of course, the new FAA reauthorization bill, which is working its way through Congress right now, has a stipulation for age 67 for airline pilots. That stirred up some controversy, as you can probably imagine. But nonetheless, if that makes it through intact, then it's no longer going to be 65; it'll be 67.
That's a part of the thought process, I think, for a lot of people when they're looking into this. How long can I do it? If I'm 55, does it make sense to make that jump to airlines? And considering you could have a 10 or 15-year second career, yeah, maybe even longer, depending on what you do.
Yeah.
But let's say I'm thinking those thoughts. I'm an insurance adjuster or a bank manager or whatever, and I start thinking, maybe I would like to do that. If I have to start from zero, is this possible? I mean, how long is it going to take me to become a commercial pilot, you think?
Oh, you mean from scratch?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it depends on if you're trying to do it as in tandem with working full time, or if you just decide that something, I'm going to throw caution to the wind and go out and just concentrate full time on that. If they concentrate full time on it, then probably about 18 months or so, maybe not even that much, depending on how much you fly, is realistic. Is realistic to go from nothing to a commercial certificate and perhaps even a CFI. But if you're trying to do it and continue to work, that's probably not quite as realistic a time frame. It might be a couple of years. Again, it just depends. There's no single answer to that one.
That's true. And I think that's worth pointing out, that it's a very individual process. One of the disadvantages when you get in as a 16-year-old, like you were when you start, financing is a problem. Most 16-year-olds don't have a significant bank account. Hopefully you have supportive parents or a grandparent that says, I see some potential in you. But if you're 35, 40 years old, you may have actually amassed a small nest egg. You might
Mhm.
have the option of I could go for that discovery flight, maybe take a few lessons at the local flight school, and then say, you know what? I think I'm going to buy my own airplane. And then I'll learn to fly in that, because now you have the advantage. I get my private pilot certificate. I can run out after work every night and go fly for an hour. And by the end of a year, you have enough time accumulated that you now qualify for your instrument and your commercial, and you can add those on relatively quickly. And you might
Mhm.
have had some fun along the way. Would you agree with that, Pat? Or am I just out to lunch?
That is such an astute observation, Jamie. I'm not surprised. No, yeah, I think that's an accurate statement. If you can fly, if you can fly every day for an hour after work, and I mean, there's weather and all of that kind of stuff, but it's conceivable that you could fly, I don't know, arbitrarily 275, 300 hours a year. If you just do it after work on a regular basis, whenever time allows, go out for $100 hamburger on a Saturday or a Sunday or something like that. You certainly can do that. 1,500 hours is the current requirement for an unrestricted ATP. So that's from a calendar standpoint, that's 3 years, I guess, 4 years, depending on, or five, I guess, depending. But math is not my strong suit at 8 o'clock this morning when we're recording this. But if you're sprinkling in some flight training along with that, the 40 hours required for your instrument rating and the 250 hours required for your commercial, I mean, you can start building some time fairly quickly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things you have to stipulate here, that you're right. 1,500 hours is the requirement for that unrestricted airline transport pilot if you want to go fly airlines, jets, things like that. But we were talking about if you had access to an airplane and you could fly 3, 4 hours a week, say, that's not that tough to pick up the 250 hours you need to become a commercial pilot in just 1 year. And
No,
that's
that's
actually a
true.
fairly enjoyable process. Now you're ready. You can go get your CFI. Somebody else is now paying for your flight time, or you could get an entry level commercial pilot job, maybe ferrying planes or flying right seat for a charter.
Yeah, if you look in the FARs, I think it's 119.1. I actually have to go back and look, but there's a reg actually that tells you what you can do with a commercial pilot certificate. You can do ferry flights, you can tow banners, you can tow gliders, you can ferry airplanes. You can do sightseeing flights. There's some limits to what you can do with that, but there's a lot of things that you can do with nothing more than a commercial pilot certificate and an instrument rating in your pocket. And CFI, of course, is one of those things. Get your CFI, and as you said, let somebody else pay for it.
Well, and I'm a very shy guy, Pat. I think you know this. We've known each other for a number of years, and I'm really an introvert. I don't leave the house if I can help it. But I think the most powerful tool we've got when we make that decision that we're going to transition into a new career and become pilots, and we're going to get our private at our instrument, get our commercial, maybe get our CFI, networking. I think there's nothing more important than networking, getting to know a guy like Pat Brown. So you can say, hey, I'm getting ready to look for a commercial job. Are you familiar with anybody who might be hiring, or do you have any advice where I might go? And we have a mutual friend, Raj, who literally was a flight instructor and was ready to make that jump to the next level. And there was a company that kept a corporate airplane on the field. He asked one of their pilots, how do I get on with you guys? And the answer was, bring me a resume. And in short order, Raj was flying for the company, and huge jump in pay. All of a sudden, a whole different thing, and the world opens up to you. I'm a big believer in networking. You want to fight me on that, or you want to join forces?
No, I'll join forces with you any day of the week. That's why going to fly-ins and even pancake breakfasts that are around, hanging out at your airport on a Saturday morning. You've heard me say this before in various occasions. At our airport, our home airport at West Houston, on any Saturday morning, there'll be, I don't know, anywhere between 10 and 20 or even 30 local pilots, most of them business people, all of them successful. Um, and at every opportunity I have to invite someone new into the circle, and normally it's a younger person, come get acquainted with some of these old graybeards out here, because we can help you, and we're happy to, and we want to, because that's the future of what we do, is those younger people. But it isn't only the younger folks. We're talking about career changes. I had a gentleman contact me through a Facebook group a few weeks ago, in his 40s, early 50s, I've forgotten what. And he was considering the same thing. And I just invited him, hey, come on out Saturday. Let's go out and have $100 hamburger and talk about it. And so he has become a kind of a part of our little circle of trust.
Yeah, I've actually flown out to lunch with you in your little circle of trust bunch, and beyond all the connections you can make, it's an enormous amount of fun.
It is an enormous amount of fun. You're right about that. Yeah.
I ran into a guy. I was up at Orlando Executive, I don't know, 6 months ago or so for an event, and I ran into a guy there who flies commercially a Cirrus SR-22.
Yeah.
Somebody owns it, a businessman of some note in the area, but this guy just flies it to take the family around, to take them out to the Bahamas, to go down to the Keys. The
Yeah.
day I met him, he was flying up to Tallahassee to pick up the owner's daughter and fly her home for the weekend. That's a real job. You don't have to be thinking about the airlines. There's all kinds of professional flying jobs that are really attractive to somebody who maybe they don't even want to work full time. They're at that stage of life where I'd like to do something exciting and interesting where I can really enjoy my career, but I don't want to work 40 hours a week. I don't want to go to the airport 5 days a week. And that's really not necessary. There's an enormous amount of latitude. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, there's a number of opportunities like that. I have a good friend who's up at a neighboring airport. He's probably in his late, maybe mid 50s. I'm not going to, I guess, maybe mid 50s. At any rate, he's an aircraft broker, but one of the things that he does, he's got a client, it's a law firm, and they have a Cirrus SR-22. And part of his job is to fly them to cases and to court and things like that when it's not here in the city of Houston. And there's another operation here at another neighboring airport that is a Cirrus aircraft management company and flight school. One of the things that they do is manage. It's exclusively Cirrus and the Cirrus Jet and the SR-20 and 22. And they've got 12 or 13 airplanes under management. They teach in some of those airplanes, and they're on the cusp of getting a Part 135 certificate where they're hiring professional pilots to fly Cirrus, the Vision Jet, and SR-22s. So that is not an airline job, but it pays well.
And it's an enormous amount of fun. You get to be outside, you get to travel a little. And for a lot of these guys, those short haul charter things, you're home at night.
Yeah.
It's not like an airline job where you're gone half the time. A lot of these folks are home on a regular basis. They rarely have to do an overnight, but they get to fly, for us, Central Florida up to the Carolinas. They hang around while the boss goes to a meeting and they fly home again. They have dinner with their family. It's a pretty good gig.
It is. So, it's that is certainly within reach at really almost any age, Jamie. There's a lot of folks out there that are suffering from corporate burnout. And what a way to end your career at flying airplanes.
Well, you're not kidding. Pat, thanks so much for talking about this. I really do appreciate it. By the way, to those of you on the other side of this camera, do you think we're nuts or do you think this makes sense? Does making a career change from whatever you're doing now to becoming a pilot at the age you are now, does that make sense? Let us know down in the comments. We really would appreciate your input because then Pat and I can get together and kind of laugh about it later. Hey, remember to hit like right down there below and subscribe to the channel if you would, because Pat and I are very lonely. We really need the friendship.